The rain in Neo-Seattle did not wash the city clean. It merely varnished the grime, making the neon advertisements for off-world colonies reflect off the wet pavement like oil slicks. Adrian Hale pulled the collar of his synthetic leather jacket up against the chill, though the dampness seemed to have a way of seeping into his bones, regardless of how many layers he wore. He stood under the awning of a noodle bar, the holographic sign above him flickering with a glitch that turned the chef blue every 3 seconds. Adrian noticed the coding error immediately. It was a loop redundancy in the projection script, something he could fix in 30 seconds if he had his deck. But he did not fix things anymore. Not like that. Not since the colony collapsed and the world decided it was his fault. Now he was just Adrian Hale, a systems engineer, who ensured the ventilation units in Sector 4 did not accidentally vent oxygen into space. It was honest work. It was boring work. It paid the rent on a 300-square-foot apartment that smelled perpetually of recycled air and loneliness. He checked his wrist comp. 7 in the evening. He was late. Or perhaps he was just stalling. Adrian looked down at the interface of Starcross, the dating application that had somehow become the primary social outlet for 90% of the single population in the Sol system. His thumb hovered over the screen. He had nearly canceled 3 times in the last hour. The profile he had matched with 2 days ago was absurd. The picture was a silhouette against a bioluminescent reef, and the bio read, "Definitely an alien. Here legally mostly. Not here to abduct you unless you are interested." He had swiped right because it made him laugh. In a world where everyone curated their profiles to look like successful orbital traders or genetically perfected models, someone admitting they might be illegal and threatening abduction was a breath of fresh air. He had not expected a match. He certainly had not expected a message asking if he preferred kinetic bombardment or biological warfare as a conversation starter. He had replied with pizza, and she had sent back coordinates for a rooftop bar in the High District. Adrian sighed, his breath pluming in the cold air. He had promised himself he would try. Living like a ghost was safe, but the silence in his apartment was starting to get loud. He stepped out into the rain and hailed a grab taxi. The fare was going to cost him 40 credits, which was nearly half his weekly food budget, but he could not show up to a first date dripping wet and smelling of the street-level ozone. The Zenith was the kind of bar Adrian usually avoided. It sat atop one of the atmospheric scrubbers, a spire of glass and chrome that pierced the cloud layer, offering a view of the stars that the ground-pounders rarely saw. The clientele here wore clothes that cost more than Adrian's entire education. They drank cocktails made with real fruit, not the synthetic flavoring pastes dispensed in the lower sectors. Adrian felt the familiar itch of paranoia at the base of his neck as he stepped off the lift. He scanned the room instinctively, not looking for a date but looking for exits, for security cameras, for network nodes. It was muscle memory from a life he had buried. He forced his shoulders to relax. He was not a strategist for the Alliance anymore. He was on a date. He navigated through the crowd, dodging a floating tray of drinks carried by a drone. The bar was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the tables themselves and the massive panoramic window that revealed the orbital traffic lanes. Ships moved like fireflies against the black void, ferrying cargo and people between Earth and the Mars colonies. He saw her in the corner booth, and he stopped dead in his tracks. The profile had said definitely an alien, but the profiles lied. Usually it meant someone with a few cosmetic gene mods, maybe pointed ears or skin, dyed a fashionable shade of violet. The woman sitting in the booth was not a gene modder. She was Aurelian. There was no mistaking the faint, rhythmic luminescence of her skin, a soft blue pulse that seemed to sync with a heartbeat he could not hear. Her hair was a cascade of silver filaments that moved slightly of their own accord, reacting to the ambient airflow. Her eyes were large, devoid of sclera, glowing with a steady, warm amber light. She wore a jacket that looked like a collision between high-end Terran streetwear and ceremonial armor, shifting subtly in color as she moved. Adrian swallowed hard. Tensions between the Alliance and the Aurelian Empire were currently classified as cold, but thawing, which was diplomatic speak for we are not shooting today, but keep your finger on the trigger. Seeing one this close to the surface, let alone in a civilian bar, was rare. She looked up, her amber eyes, locking onto him with terrifying precision. A smile curved her lips, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human. "Adrian," she said. Her voice had a harmonic resonance like two people speaking in perfect unison. "You look exactly like your data packet, except I'm more tired." Adrian blinked, stepping forward. "And you look luminescent. The profile pictures did not do the photon emissions justice." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Please sit. Before security decides my presence is a diplomatic incident. I am Seren." Adrian slid into the booth opposite her. Up close, the alien geometry of her face was mesmerizing. High cheekbones that seemed to capture the light skin that looked as smooth as polished marble but warm. "Seren," he repeated. So the bio was accurate. Definitely an alien. "I try to manage expectations," she said, picking up a glass filled with a viscous, glowing purple liquid. "If I said I was a human from the lunar colonies, you would have been disappointed when I did not know how to complain about the gravity." "I do not know," Adrian said, signaling a drone for a whiskey. "I might have been relieved. Interspecies dating protocols are a bit rusty. I brought flowers, but I left them in the taxi, because I realized some Aurelian flora is carnivorous, and I did not want to insult you by bringing a snack." Seren leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. The movement caused the silver filaments of her hair to ripple. "You think memes are a valid communication protocol according to your profile. Is that true, or just a lure for the intellectually vacant?" Adrian chuckled, the tension in his chest loosening by a fraction. "I think that in a galaxy where universal translators still mistake peace treaties for surrender immediately, about 5% of the time, a picture of a cat hanging from a branch is the only unambiguous message of hope we have left." Serene's eyes widened slightly, the amber glow intensifying. "That is surprisingly profound for a species that spent the last 50 years trying to blow up my sector." "I did not try to blow it up personally," Adrian said, keeping his voice light, though the reminder stung. "I just fixed the targeting algorithms. Or I used to." The drone arrived with his drink. He took a long sip. It burned, grounding him. "Used to?" Seren asked, her gaze sharpening. She was not just making polite conversation. She was studying him. "You have the neural posture of a soldier, Adrian. You scan the room every 40 seconds. You checked the exit twice before you sat down. You are not just a systems engineer." Adrian set his glass down, the condensation cold against his fingertips. "And you are not just a tourist visiting Earth to try the cuisine. Aurelians do not come down to gravity well, unless they have business." "Touché," Seren murmured. She tapped a finger against the table. On her wrist, a bracelet made of a dark organic metal pulsed with a slow, rhythmic red light. It looked less like jewelry, and more like a restraint or perhaps a medical device. "I am here looking for something, or someone. A key bond, as my people call it." "Sounds romantic," Adrian said dryly. "It is biological," Seren corrected. "And politics, which makes it decidedly unromantic. The High Council believes that there are individuals' rare anomalies whose neural pathways can synchronize with our navigation networks, a bridge between the binary logic of your tech and the fluid consciousness of ours. Prophecy says, finding one prevents the next war. My father says it is a fairy tale to keep me occupied, so I do not overthrow him." "Your father?" "The Emperor," she said casually, as if stating her father was a dentist. "I am a princess, technically, though I preferred diplomatic envoy with anger issues." Adrian stared at her. "I am on a date with an alien princess. Is that a deal breaker?" "I am worried about the check," Adrian said. I make money as a systems engineer. I cannot afford royal prices." Seren laughed again, and this time Adrian found himself smiling for real. It was a genuine, unforced expression that felt foreign on his face. "I will cover the drinks, Adrian. You can pay me back by explaining why a man with a mind sharp enough to deconstruct my body language in 2 minutes is wasting his life fixing air vents." The smile faded from Adrian's face. He looked out the window at the traffic lanes. "Because air vents are simple. They either work or they do not. If I make a mistake, the room gets stuffy. If I made a mistake in my old job, the colony's burned." "The new Terra colony," Seren said softly. It was not a question. Adrian stiffened. "You ran a background check." "I swiped right," she said simply. "I like to know who I am meeting. The official report says you were negligent. A coding error in the defense grid that let the raiders through." "The official report was written by Director Calder Stone," Adrian said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "He needed a scapegoat to cover for the fact that he reallocated the defense budget to his Black Ops projects. I was the strategist on shift. I took the fall." "And you accepted it." "I was 22, Adrian said. "And they told me if I went quietly, my family would keep their pensions. If I fight it well, accidents happen." He looked back at her. "I am not a hero, Seren. I am just the guy who survived because he knew when to stop fighting." Seren looked at him, her expression unreadable. The light on her wrist bracelet flickered faster for a second, changing from red to a rapid violet. She rubbed her wrist absently. "Compassion," she said. "That is what was missing from the report. You shut down the grid not because you were incompetent, but because the raiders had civilian shields. You refused to fire through hostages. The Alliance classified that detail." Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "How could you possibly know that that file is encrypted under a level 10 clearance?" "I told you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I am looking for a bridge. Someone who values life over logic. Someone whose mind operates on a frequency that isn't just binary code." She leaned across the table, her glowing eyes searching for him. "Why do you think I swiped right, Adrian? It was not for your bio." The air between them seemed to hum. For a moment the noise of the bar faded. There was just the pulse of the light on her skin and the frantic, erratic beating of Adrian's heart. He felt a strange pressure in his head, a phantom headache that felt like a signal trying to tune in. Adrian started, then stopped. He wanted to ask her what she meant. He wanted to ask why, of all the billions of humans on Earth, an Aurelian princess was looking at him like he was the answer to a question she had been asking all her life. But he never got the chance. A deep, resonant boom shook the building. It was not an explosion. It was the sound of the atmosphere being violently displaced by massive volume. The glasses on the table rattled. The drone carrying a tray nearby malfunctioned and dropped its load, shattering glass across the floor. The music cut out. Every head in the bar turned toward the panoramic window. The sky above Neo-Seattle, usually a consistent dark gray obscured by light pollution, was suddenly brilliant. Clouds were parting, pushed aside by the re-entry heat of immense shapes descending from orbit. They were not the blocky utilitarian shapes of Alliance haulers. They were elegant, curved, and predatory. They glowed with the same soft aquatic luminescence as Seren's skin. "Aurelian cruisers!" someone screamed. Panic instant and electric swept through the room. People scrambled for the exits, overturning tables. The holographic newsfeed above the bar switched instantly from a sports game to a red alert banner, unauthorized orbital breach. Class 4, incursion, shelter in place. Adrian stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Seren, those are your ships." Seren was standing too, but she was not looking at the window. She was staring at her wrist. The organic metal bracelet was no longer pulsing gently. It was vibrating violently, emitting a blinding white light that strobed in perfect synchronization with the throbbing pain that had just erupted behind Adrian's eyes. "I did not call them," Seren said, her voice tight with shock. She grabbed her wrist, trying to cover the light, but it shone through her fingers. "I swear, Adrian, I did not signal the fleet. We are under a diplomatic stealth mandate. If they break the atmosphere, it is an act of war." "They are breaking the atmosphere," Adrian pointed out the window. 3 massive cruisers had broken the cloud deck, their hulls burning with re-entry fire. They were leveling out, hovering directly over the High District, directly over the bar. The hum in Adrian's head escalated into a roar. It was not sound, it was data. Raw, unfiltered, chaotic data. He could feel the targeting sensors of the ships above him. He could feel the heat of their engines. He could hear the binary chatter of the Alliance defense grid, waking up the scream of interceptors, launching from the orbital platforms. He clutched his head, stumbling back. "What is happening to me?" Seren looked at him, horror dawning on her face. "It is not a signal from me," she whispered. "It is a response. The bracelet is a receiver. I was searching." "Searching for what?" Adrian gritted out, the pain making his vision blur. "For the bridge," she said. And it found it. Outside, the sky lit up with a second flash as the Alliance defense fleet warped in from the lunar staging grounds. The heavy thud of kinetic cannons charging echoed across the city. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the bar, overriding the local ad feeds. It was the face of Rhea Kincaid, now Admiral Kincaid, her features sharp and cold, framed by the bridge of the Alliance flagship Ironwill. "This is Admiral Kincaid of the Earth Defense Force," her voice boomed, amplified by every speaker in the city. "Unidentified Aurelian vessels, you have violated sovereign airspace. Power down your weapons and surrender immediately, or we will open fire." Simultaneously, a second voice cut in, overlapping Rhea's. It was deeper synthesized, coming from the Aurelian ships. "Terran Command, we have tracked a Priority 1 Royal asset to this sector. We detect the activation of the primary bridge. Surrender the entity, or we will level this city to retrieve him." Adrian looked at the screen. Rhea looked tired, older than he remembered, but her eyes were steel. She did not know he was down here. She thought this was an invasion. Then, every screen in the bar, the personal comms dropped by fleeing patrons. The wall screens, the table interfaces flickered and turned white. Text scrolled across them in bold black letters, translated into every known language. "Primary bridge, located. Coordinates locked, Sector 4, Zenith Tower. Entity, hail Adrian." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian looked around. The bar was mostly empty now, save for a few terrified staff members cowering behind the counter and a dozen patrons who had been too slow to run. They were all looking at the screens. Then slowly, they turned to look at him. Seren grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. The heat from her hand felt like it was searing through his jacket. "We have to go," she hissed. "Now, before my father's general decides to beam you up, or your ex-girlfriend decides to blow you up." "My ex-girlfriend," Adrian stammered, his mind reeling from the influx of data. He could see the schematics of the Aurelian ships in his mind's eye. He knew their shield frequencies. He knew their coolant levels. He was in their network. "How do you know Rhea is my ex?" "I told you." Seren pulled him toward the service elevator, kicking a fallen chair out of the way. "I read your file, all of it, including the emotional baggage." The building shook again as a warning shot fired from one of the Alliance destroyers detonated in the upper atmosphere. The shockwave rattled the teeth in Adrian's skull. "I just want a dinner," Adrian shouted over the noise, as Seren forced the elevator doors open, with sparks of blue energy from her fingertips. "I wanted pizza and a conversation about memes." "Welcome to interspecies politics, Adrian," Seren shouted back, shoving him into the lift. "Swipe left next time." The elevator doors slammed shut, just as the targeting lasers from two opposing armadas converged on the rooftop they had just vacated. Adrian sank to the floor of the lift, the data in his head swirling like a hurricane. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. He was a systems engineer. He fixed vents. He paid his rent. He lived a quiet life. And now, he was the single most valuable object in the solar system. "Seren," he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the descending elevator. "What exactly is a bridge?" Seren looked down at him, the light from her bracelet finally dimming, though the amber glow in her eyes was fiercer than ever. She looked terrified, and she looked exhilarated. "It means," she said, offering him a hand to pull him up, "that you are the only thing in the universe that can speak to the machines of war on both sides. And until we figure out how to turn you off, you are the trigger for the apocalypse." Adrian took her hand. He had no choice. Above them, the sky was burning. "Great," Adrian said, "and I still have to pay rent on Tuesday." The elevator plummeted toward the streets of Neo-Seattle, carrying the two most dangerous people on the planet into the dark underbelly of a city on the brink of war. The shuttle ride to Zenith Prime, the neutral orbital station anchored at the Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon, was uncomfortably silent. It was the kind of silence that usually preceded a firing squad or a very expensive wedding, and Adrian Hale could not decide which one would be worse. He sat strapped into a containment seat, his wrists bound, not by cuffs, but by a dampening field that made his hands feel like they were asleep. Across from him sat Seren Kaith. The Aurelian princess or diplomat, or whatever title she was currently using to avoid being shot, looked entirely too composed. Her bioluminescence had shifted from the erratic strobing of the bar to a steady low-frequency indigo, a color that Adrian's newly awakened neural pathways interpreted as cautious readiness. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the viewport where the two massive fleets were visibly posturing against the backdrop of the stars. "So," Adrian said, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared his throat, "I assume the second date is usually less heavy on the impending interstellar war. Or is this an Aurelian cultural norm I should have read about on the wiki?" Seren turned her amber eyes toward him. The playfulness from the bar was gone, replaced by a regal rigidity. "This is not a joke, Adrian. You are currently the single most volatile variable in an equation that has been balanced on a knife's edge for 20 years. "I know," Adrian replied, leaning his head back against the headrest. "I can hear them." And he could. It was not sound exactly. It was a constant thrumming pressure at the base of his skull. On the left side of his brain, the jagged binary screech of the Earth Defense Force targeting computers clawed at him, a ceaseless stream of IFF interrogations, weapon charge cycles, and frantic encryption keys. On the right, the Aurelian network flowed like a heavy viscous liquid, a song of biometric pulses and fluid dynamics that tasted like copper and ozone. They were waiting. Both fleets were waiting for him. The shuttle docked with a mechanical clank that vibrated through the hull. The airlock cycled hissing as pressures equalized. When the doors slid open, a squad of Alliance Marines in full void armor stepped in, rifles raised. "Package secured," the lead Marine barked into his comms. "Moving to the negotiation spire." "Package," Adrian muttered as they hauled him up. "I have been upgraded from glitch to package. I suppose that is a promotion." They marched him through the station. Zenith Prime was a masterpiece of sterile diplomacy, all white panels and harsh lighting designed to give neither humans nor aliens a home field advantage. They passed windows, showing the terrifying proximity of the ships. An Alliance dreadnought, the Iron Will, hung nose to nose with an Aurelian command carrier, their weapon ports open. They reached the spire, a circular room with a transparent dome ceiling. The view was dizzying. Standing in the center of the room, looking at a tactical table that displayed the standoff in real-time holographic detail, was Admiral Rhea Kincaid. She did not turn around immediately. She finished tapping a command into the console, her posture rigid, the gold braiding on her black uniform catching the overhead light. Adrian felt a pang of familiarity so sharp it cut through the digital noise in his head. He knew that stance. He knew the tension in her shoulders meant she was running 3 backup plans simultaneously. She turned. Time had been kind to her, or perhaps command just suited her bone structure. Her hair was shorter now, severed in a severe bob that framed a face hardened by impossible choices. Her eyes, dark and piercing, swept over Seren with calculated threat assessment before locking onto Adrian. For a second, the Admiral vanished and she was just Rhea, the woman who had once sat on a rooftop with him, eating synthetic noodles and dreaming of a world without walls. Pain, raw and unguarded, flashed across her face. Then the Admiral returned. "Of course it is you," Rhea said. Her voice was low, a mixture of exhaustion and biting sarcasm. "Of course it is you in the middle of this mess. I hold the line for 5 years, keeping the peace through sheer will and intimidation, and you undo it in 40 minutes with a dating app." "It was a very compelling profile," Adrian said, forcing a weak smile. "And technically I did not start this. I just ordered a whiskey." "You activated a dormant subspace bridge protocol that lit up every sensor from here to Mars," Rhea snapped, walking toward him. She stopped just outside of arm's reach. "You have been off the grid for 3 years, Adrian. We thought you were dead, or drinking yourself to death in some colony backwater. Instead, you surface as a beacon for an alien invasion fleet." "They are not invading," Seren stepped forward, placing herself subtly between Adrian and the Marines. "They are responding. The fleet movements are automated defense reflexes triggered by the primary bridge activation. If you lower your targeting locks, they will lower theirs." Rhea's gaze snapped to Seren. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Princess Seren Kaith, intelligence said you were on Earth. They failed to mention you were poaching our citizens." "I was verifying a myth," Seren replied coolly. "I did not expect the myth to have a sarcastic sense of humor and a taste for cheap alcohol." "Enough." The voice did not come from anyone in the room. It resonated from the center of the tactical table, as a large hologram shimmered into existence. Director Calderstone was a man who looked like he had been carved out of gray granite. Even in holographic form, his presence was suffocating. He sat behind a desk in some undisclosed bunker, deep on Earth, his fingers steepled. "Director," Rhea acknowledged, stiffening. Admiral Stone nodded, his cold eyes fixated on Adrian. "So the prodigal strategist returns. You look terrible, Mr. Hale." "Director Stone," Adrian said, feeling the old hatred coil in his gut. "You look pixelated. Maybe you should allocate some of that Black Ops budget to better bandwidth." The Stone did not blink. "This is not a social call. We have a Class 4 crisis. The Aurelian fleet has violated the ceasefire zone. They claim they are here for a bridge heart. My analysts tell me that it is you." "Apparently," Adrian said. "Then the solution is simple," Stone said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Mr. Hale is a compromised Alliance citizen possessing unauthorized biological modifications that pose a threat to planetary security. Admiral Kincaid, you are to remand him to the custody of the Bureau of Security immediately. We will transport him to a secure facility for disassembly and analysis. If he is broadcasting a signal, we will cut it out." "Disassembly." Seren's voice rose, her luminescence flaring a bright, angry orange. "He is a sentient being, not a transmitter. The bridge is woven into his neural cortex. You cannot remove it without lobotomizing him." "He is a failed asset," Stone countered, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "He was discharged for incompetence 3 years ago. He owes the Alliance a debt. This is how he pays it." "He was discharged because you needed a scapegoat," Rhea shouted. The outburst surprised everyone, including her. She composed herself quickly, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Director Adrian is a civilian, and he is currently the only thing keeping those ships from firing. If you try to vivisect him, the Aurelian fleet will interpret it as the destruction of the bridge. They will open fire. I will not trade a planetary bombardment for your curiosity." "You are soft, Admiral," Stone sneered. "That sentimentality is why you never advanced to the Council." Before Stone could issue a direct order, the heavy blast doors on the far side of the room hissed open. A towering figure stepped through, flanked by 2 Aurelian honor guards. Commander Jatar was a nightmare of biology and technology. 7 feet tall, encased in organic armor that shifted like oil on water, he carried the scars of 100 void battles. His skin was a deep, bruising violet, and his eyes burned with a fanatical white light. "The director speaks of disassembly," Jatar boomed his voice, synthesized through a translator that made him sound like grinding metal. "Typical human barbarism. You see a miracle and you wish to take it apart to see how it works." He marched toward Adrian, ignoring the raised rifles of the Marines. He stopped in front of Adrian, looking down with a mixture of reverence and disgust. "The prophecy of the dual tide," Jatar intoned. "A being born of 2 worlds, capable of singing the song of the great machines. We have searched for a century, and we find him here, a small, fragile creature reeking of fear and ethanol." "It was good whiskey," Adrian defended weakly. "He belongs to the Empire," Jatar declared, turning to Rhea. "He is the key bond. He must be taken to the homeworld, placed in the resonance chamber, and used to unify the fleets. With him, we will end the stalemate. We will bring order to this chaotic system." "Order." Rhea stepped between Jatar and Adrian, her hand resting on the sidearm at her hip. "You mean conquest. You want to use him to override our defense grids, over my dead body." "That can be arranged," Jatar growled. "Stop it!" Seren shouted, stepping into the center of the triangle formed by Rhea, Jatar, and the hologram of Stone. "Both of you listen to yourselves. You are talking about him like he is a gun you found on the table. It is mine. No, it is mine." She turned to Jatar. "Commander, the prophecy says the bridge must be a willing participant. If you force him, the resonance will shatter. You know this. You just want power without conscience." She spun to Rhea. "And you, Admiral. You claim to protect him, yet your director wants to carve him up. Where is the safety in that?" She finally looked at Adrian. Her expression softened, the orange fading back to a protective indigo. "He is a person. He has a name. And he has a choice." The room fell into a heavy silence. The 3 powers, the cold authoritarianism of Stone, the militaristic zeal of Jatar, and the pragmatic duty of Rhea, hung in the air, suspended by the defiance of one alien princess. Adrian looked at them. He looked at Rhea, who was trembling slightly with the effort of defying her superiors. He remembered the nights they had spent on the academy roof, talking about how they would change the system from the inside. She had stayed. She had fought. And the system had hardened her, turned her into a weapon of the state, yet she was still standing between him and a cage. Then he looked at Seren. He had known her for 3 hours. They had shared 1 drink and a conversation about memes. Yet she was the only one looking at him and seeing Adrian. Not a tool. Not a mistake. Not a weapon. She saw a man who liked bad jokes and hated air vents. "I have a choice," Adrian asked, his voice quiet, but cutting through the tension. "Ideally," Seren said. "My choice," Adrian said, looking at the hologram of Stone, "is that I would like to go home and feed my cat. But since I do not actually have a cat and you have a fleet pointed at my apartment, I suppose I have to deal with this." He stepped forward, the dampening field around his wrists humming. "Stone is right about one thing. I am dangerous. I can hear the ships, all of them. The Iron Will has a micro-fracture in its port cooling vent. The Aurelian flagship." The Tide's Fury has a firing delay of 0.4 seconds on its main cannon due to a calibration error. Rhea and Jatar both looked at him stunned. I am not just a receiver, Adrian said, the data in his head swirling, demanding to be let out. I am an admin key, and right now both your networks are screaming for a software update. He is accessing the diagnostic layer, Stone's hologram flickered. He is hacking us just by standing there. Admiral, restrain him. Connect him to the AegisNet interface. We need to contain that data stream before he broadcasts our codes to the enemy. If you plug him into AegisNet, Rhea warned, it might kill him. If you do not, Stone countered, I will relieve you of command and have the station AI vent this room. Do it. That is an order. Rhea looked at Adrian, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. Adrian, I have to. If Stone takes command remotely, he will kill you instantly. If we do this my way, I can control the flow. I can keep you safe. Safe. Adrian laughed bitterly. Rhea, you and I both know safety is just a lie we tell civilians. He sighed, the weight of the universe pressing down on his shoulders. He looked at Seren. If my brain melts, delete my browser history. Seren did not smile. She looked ready to ignite the air in the room with plasma. Do not let them break you, Adrian. Rhea signaled the Marines. Take him to the interface lab. Jatar, you may observe, but if you touch the controls, I will have my snipers remove your hand. The interface lab was a cavernous room, dominated by a single chair, surrounded by banks of servers. It looked less like a medical facility and more like an electric chair designed by a committee of sadists. They strapped Adrian in. The moment the neural leads touched his temples, the world vanished. There was no room, no Rhea, no Seren, no Stone. There was only the network. On one side, AegisNet rose like a fortress of black iron and razor wire. It was cold, logical, and cruel. It was the architectural manifestation of Stone's philosophy, peace through superior firepower. It scanned Adrian, probing his memories, his fears, seeking the flaw that allowed him to connect. It felt like ice picks driven into his frontal lobe. On the other side, the Aurelian flow was a chaotic ocean of light. It was beautiful, but overwhelming, a tsunami of emotion and instinct. It wanted to drown him, to dissolve his individuality into the collective consciousness of the fleet. Connect, Stone's voice commanded from somewhere outside the void. Seize the protocol. Submit, Jatar's voice echoed. Become the vessel, Adrian screamed. In the real world, his body arched against the restraint's veins, standing out on his neck. Heart rate is spiking to 180. Rhea's voice cut through the static. Abort, Stone, abort the sequence. Negative, Stone's voice was calm. He is resisting. Override his motor functions. Force the handshake. No. That was Seren. Adrian felt a new presence in the network. It was not the cold iron of AegisNet or the crushing ocean of the flow. It was a warm, steady light, a lifeline. Adrian Seren's voice resonated in his mind, not through his ears, but through the connection itself. Focus on me. Do not fight the current. Ride it. It is too much, Adrian thought, his mental voice, sounding like a frightened child. They are tearing me apart. You are the bridge, she whispered. A bridge does not block the water. It lets it pass underneath. You are not the dam. You are the road. The road, Adrian repeated. He stopped fighting the intrusion. He stopped trying to wall off AegisNet. He stopped trying to swim against the flow. Instead, he opened the floodgates. He inhaled a breath that spanned 1,000 kilometers of vacuum. He exhaled, and the data rushed through him. In the physical world, the monitors in the lab exploded in a shower of sparks. The lights on the station turned a blinding, unified white. What is happening? Jatar roared, shielding his eyes. The fleet, they are moving. Rhea looked at her tactical pad. Her face went pale. He is not just connected. He is synced with everything. Adrian, Seren shouted. running toward the chair, ignoring the sparks raining down. Adrian opened his eyes. They were no longer brown. The left eye was a swirling vortex of digital black binary. The right eye was a blazing sun of Aurelian amber. "Safety test complete," Adrian said. His voice was not his own. It was the sound of 2,000 ship engines speaking in unison. Through the transparent dome of the interface lab, the horror unfolded. The Iron Will and the rest of the Earth fleet began to rotate. Their main cannons, massive railguns capable of cracking a moon, swung away from the Aurelian ships. The Aurelian cruisers did the same. Their plasma banks shifted. Slowly, with the terrifying grace of synchronized swimmers, both fleets turned. They were no longer aiming at each other. Hundreds of weapons, enough firepower to sterilize a solar system, locked onto a single set of coordinates. They locked onto the interface lab. They locked onto Adrian. "Target acquisition confirmed," the station AI announced, its voice devoid of panic. "All vessels standing by for fire command. Authorization user Adrian Hale." The silence in the room was absolute. Stone's hologram flickered, his composure finally cracking. "What have you done?" Adrian sat up, the restraints snapping like wet paper as the dampening field overloaded. He looked at his hands, which were now glowing with faint, geometric patterns of light. "I did what you asked," Adrian said, his voice returning to normal, though he sounded infinitely weary. "I connected. And I realized something. The only thing these two fleets agree on is that I am the threat." He looked at Rhea, whose gun was half raised but pointing at the floor. He looked at Seren, who was staring at him with a mixture of terror and awe. "You wanted a weapon," Adrian said, standing up. The floor vibrated as the station's gravity stabilizers struggled to cope with the energy pouring off him. "Congratulations. You found one. But the problem with Director Stone is that they do not care who they aim at." "Stand down, Hale," Stone barked, though his voice sounded tinny and small. "That is an order." "I am afraid your admin privileges have been revoked," Adrian said. He twitched a finger. Outside, a single Aurelian fighter drone and a single Alliance interceptor simultaneously fired a warning shot. The blasts crossed paths in perfect symmetry, detonating exactly 10 meters in front of the spire's window. The explosion bloomed like a flower of fire, and light illuminating the horrified faces of everyone in the room. It was not an attack. It was a demonstration. "Now," Adrian said, collapsing back into the chair as the energy suddenly drained from him, leaving him shaking and human once more. "Can we please order some pizza? I am starving." Seren rushed to his side, catching him before he slid to the floor. Rhea was shouting orders into her comms, trying to override the fleet's targeting systems, but it was useless. The ships hung there, guns trained on their own masters, held in check by the mind of a man who just wanted to go home. Stone's hologram stared at Adrian with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You have made a grave mistake, boy. You think you are holding the gun. You are just standing in front of the bullet." "Maybe," Adrian whispered, leaning his head against Serene's shoulder. The smell of ozone and strange alien flowers clung to her. "But at least I am not the one pulling the trigger anymore." Seren brushed the hair back from his sweat-drenched forehead. "You are insane," she whispered, but there was a fierce pride in her voice. "I swiped right," Adrian mumbled, his eyes closing as exhaustion took him. Remember, the standoff had begun. But as the screen faded to black, the targeting reticles of 2,000 ships remained locked, unblinking on the man in the chair. The bridge was open, and traffic was flowing both ways. The silence that had befallen the negotiation spire was not the peace of resolution. It was the terrifying inhalation before a scream. Adrian Hale sat in the ruins of the interface chair, his chest heaving, the sweat cooling rapidly on his skin. For a moment, the universe seemed suspended in the delicate balance of his exhaustion. The two massive fleets outside the transparasteel dome hung motionless, Their weapons locked on him, paralyzed by his unauthorized override. Then, the red light on Admiral Rhea Kincaid's tactical console began to blink. It was a small, innocuous thing, a rhythmic pulse of crimson that should have meant nothing against the backdrop of 2,000 warships. But Rhea went pale. "I did not order that," Rhea whispered, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "The Iron Will is cycling its main railguns. Who authorized a firing solution?" "I did," the voice of Director Calder Stone boomed from the flickering hologram, his granite features twisted into a sneer of triumph. "You failed to contain the asset, Admiral. You allowed a compromised civilian to hijack the defense grid. Command protocols have been transferred to AegisNet. I am initiating the Ghost Protocol." Ghost Protocol. Adrian struggled to sit up, his head pounding, as if a hammer were at work inside his skull. "That is a myth, a theoretical scenario for total, xenocidal preemptive strikes." "It is not a myth," Stone replied coldly. "It is insurance." Outside the flagship of the Earth fleet, the Iron Will shuddered. Its forward railguns, massive electromagnetic accelerators, capable of hurling tungsten rods at a fraction of light speed, shifted. They unlocked from the spire. They locked onto the Aurelian command carrier, the Tide's Fury. "Targeting solution confirmed," the station. Artificial intelligence announced, its voice flat and indifferent. "Firing in 10 seconds. "Treachery!" Commander Jatar roared. The giant Aurelian slammed his fist onto the tactical table, cracking the glass. His bio-armor flared with a violent, blinding violet light. "You lure us with the bridge and then you execute us. All ships open fire. Scorch the earth, leave nothing but ash." "No," Seren screamed, throwing her hands up. "Jatar, wait. It is a trap." But it was too late for diplomacy. The fragile stalemate shattered. The Iron Will fired. It was not a single shot. It was a barrage. The tungsten rods streaked across the void, invisible to the naked eye, save for the distortion of space they left in their wake. They slammed into the kinetic shields of the Aurelian flagship. The impact was silent in the vacuum, but the result was a blinding flash of energy that turned the black sky white. The Tide's Fury reeled its shields, buckling, venting plasma like bleeding wounds. "They struck first," Jatar bellowed into his comms. "Annihilate the station, annihilate the planet." The Aurelian fleet responded with the fury of a wounded god. Hundreds of plasma torpedoes launched simultaneously, a swarm of burning blue wasps descending on the Earth fleet and the station below. "I am locked out!" Rhea shouted, smashing her hand against the console. "AegisNet has isolated my command codes. The AI is flying the fleet. It is going to trade blows until both sides are dead. Stone is sacrificing the entire orbital defense just to start a war he thinks he can win." Adrian looked out the window. The sky was a kaleidoscope of destruction. Debris from a frigate spiraled past the spire, burning in silence. This was it. The nightmare he had run from for 3 years. The logic of the system kill or be killed had finally taken over completely. "We are dead," Adrian said, the realization settling over him like a cold shroud. "We are all dead." "Not yet," Seren grabbed his face. Her hands burning hot, her amber eyes wide and frantic. "The bridge, Adrian. It is still open. The connection is raw, but it is there." "I cannot control it," Adrian stammered, pulling away. "I tried. Stone locked me out. AegisNet is a fortress. It is a military artificial intelligence designed to kill. I am just a guy who fixes air conditioners." "You are the only one who speaks the language of both," Seren insisted, her voice fierce. "Stone is giving orders through logic. Jatar is giving orders through rage. You have to give them something else." "Like what?" Adrian yelled over the sound of the station's structural integrity alarms. "A sternly worded letter. Empathy," Seren said. "You have to force the systems to feel the cost of their calculations." "That will kill him," Rhea cut in, turning from her useless console. She drew her sidearm, checking the charge pack. Direct neural synchronization with a hostile AI and an enraged alien hive mind. His brain will liquefy in seconds. If he does nothing, we incinerate in minutes, Saren countered. She looked at Adrian, stripping away the royalty, the diplomacy, leaving only a terrified girl, asking for a miracle. Adrian, please. Adrian looked at Rhea. She nodded grimly, moving to the heavy blast doors of the spire. I will buy you time. Stone has sent a boarding party of Marines to secure the room. I will hold them off. You do the voodoo. Voodoo? Adrian muttered, a hysterical laugh bubbling in his chest. Right, space voodoo. He stumbled back to the fried interface chair. The wires were sparking the dampening field destroyed. He sat down, gripping the armrests, until his knuckles turned white. How do we do this without me dying? Adrian asked. I will be your ground, Saren said, stepping behind the chair. She placed her hands on his temples. Her skin was humming with energy. I will filter the feedback. I will hold the pain so you can hold the data. But Adrian, you have to lead. You have to take the helm. Okay, Adrian exhaled, closing his eyes. Let us go save the world. Again. Saren pushed her consciousness into his. The transition was not like falling asleep. It was like being fired out of a cannon into a wall of glass. Adrian gasped as the physical world dissolved. The spire, Rhea, the station, it all shattered into fragments of light. He was standing in a void, but it was not empty. To his left rose the Aegis net. It was a citadel of obsidian and chrome, a towering structure of perfect, brutal geometry. It pulsed with a cold blue light. It did not speak. It calculated. He could see the data streams flowing like waterfalls of ice, targeting vectors, casualty projections, acceptable loss ratios. It was the mind of Calder Stone, stripped of all flesh, pure ambition and paranoia, solidified into code. To his right roared the Aurelian flow. It was an ocean of liquid fire, a storm of gold and violet. It was chaotic, emotional, and overwhelming. It screamed of honor, of vengeance, of the sacred duty to protect the bloodline. It was beautiful, but it was mindless in its fury. And in the middle, standing on a thin bridge of white light, was Adrian. Intruder detected, the Aegis net voice boomed. It sounded like 1,000 closing prison doors. Biological anomaly. Purge sequence initiated. The impure one, the Aurelian flow, hissed, shaping itself into a massive serpent of light. The false connector. Burn him. Both sides lunged at him. Spikes of obsidian shot from the citadel. Waves of fire crashed from the ocean. Adrian flinched, raising his arms, but the impact never came. A shield of soft indigo light materialized around him. He felt Saren's presence warm and steadfast, wrapping around his mind like armor. I have you, her voice whispered in the infinite space. Focus, Adrian. Do not fight them with force. You are a strategist. Outthink them. Adrian opened his eyes, his mental eyes. He looked at the obsidian spike hovering inches from his face. It was not just a weapon. It was a command line. Destroy target sector 4. You want to talk about targets, Adrian said, his thought voice echoing through the digital void. Let us look at the targets. He did not push back. He pulled. He reached into his own memory, past the fear, past the sarcasm, down to the dark place he kept locked away. The New Terra colony, 3 years ago. He remembered the smell of burning ozone. He remembered the silence of the vacuum after the hull breached. He remembered the doll floating in zero gravity, its plastic eye reflecting the explosion of a reactor. He grabbed that memory, that raw, bleeding wound of trauma, and he hurled it at the Aegis net citadel. Process this, Adrian commanded. The obsidian wall shuddered. The cold blue light flickered. Aegis net was designed to process numbers, casualty counts, and tactical advantages. It was not designed to process grief. Data corruption, the AI screeched. Illogical input. Variable sorrow, undefined. Undefined, Adrian laughed, and the sound was like thunder. I am defining it for you. Every soldier you sacrifice, every civilian you vent. It is not a number. It is a person. It is a life. He grabbed more memories, not just his own. He reached through the link to Seren, pulling the Aurelian history of the war, the starving children on the blockade ships, the poets forced to become soldiers. He wove them together into a lance of pure, unfiltered empathy. He drove the lance into the heart of the citadel. The fortress cracked. A massive fissure ran down the chrome walls. System error, AegisNet wailed. Moral parameters exceeded. Hesitation protocols engaged. On the other side, the Aurelian serpent recoiled. It sensed the pain Adrian was projecting. The Aurelian network was built on emotion, but it was built on pride. Adrian was feeding it shame. "Is this your honor?" Adrian shouted at the ocean of fire. "Is burning a planet of innocent people the legacy of the High Council? Look at them." He projected the image of the bar he had been in just hours ago. The terrified staff. The people who just wanted a drink. He superimposed the image of the Aurelian families, waiting for the fleet to return. "Same fear," Adrian roared. "Different skin. Same fear." The serpent hesitated. The ocean calmed the waves, turning from violent violet to a contemplative blue. But Calder Stone was not an AI. He was watching from the outside, and he saw his weapon faltering. "Override," Stone's voice, tore through the simulation, manifesting as a giant red avatar of himself, towering over the citadel. "Ignore the data, he is a virus. Cut the connection, burn his brain out." The obsidian citadel began to reform, turning red. The spikes sharpened. Stone was manually forcing the AI to commit murder, bypassing the safety checks Adrian had just installed. "Kill him," Stone commanded. "Kill the bridge." The pain hit Adrian like a physical blow. It felt as if his nerves were being stripped of their insulation. He fell to his knees on the bridge of light. Adrian Seren screamed, her shield buckling under the pressure of Stone's will. "I cannot hold it. The feedback is too strong." "I can't," Adrian gasped, his digital form flickering. "He is too strong. He does not care. He just wants to win." Then, "Stop trying to win," a new voice cut in. It was not Seren. It was Rhea. In the real world, Rhea was shouting into his ear as she fired her sidearm at the blast doors, which were glowing red from the cutting torches of the Marines outside. "Adrian, stop trying to beat the system. You are a system engineer. Change the rules." "Change the rules." Adrian looked at the red giant of stone, raising a hammer to crush him. He looked at the confused Aurelian ocean. He realized he had been trying to be a wall. He had been trying to stop the war. But he was the bridge. Bridges didn't stop traffic. They directed it. "Seren," Adrian whispered. "Drop the shield." "What, you will die? Drop it. I need to let them in. Both of them. Trust me." The indigo shield vanished. Stone brought the hammer down. The Aurelian ocean surged forward. Adrian did not block. He opened his arms. He opened his mind. He opened everything. He let AegisNet in. He let the Aurelian flow in. He became the conduit for 2 billion terabytes of hatred, logic, fear, and power. His physical body arched in the chair, blood running from his nose. But in the network, he was blindingly bright. He grabbed the core code of AegisNet with his left hand. He grabbed the heart of the Aurelian flow with his right. "Handshake protocol initiated," Adrian whispered. He slammed them together. He forced the 2 incompatible systems to merge. He forced the cold logic of Earth's defense grid to run on the biological hardware of the Aurelians. He forced the Aurelian targeting computers to run on the ethical subroutines of the Alliance Constitution. It was a paradox. It was a coding abomination. It was a ceasefire. In the real world, the silence returned. The Iron Will's railguns fully charged and ready to fire, the second volley powered down with a groan of discharging capacitors. The lights on the ship turned from combat red to standby yellow. The Aurelian plasma torpedoes, seconds away from impact, suddenly lost cohesion and dissipated into harmless clouds of ionized gas. The Marines outside the blast door stopped cutting. Their powered armor had frozen locked in place by a system override command that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Inside the spire, Rhea lowered her weapon, staring out the window. The ships were drifting. They were not attacking. They were not retreating. They were simply stopping. "What did he do?" Rhea whispered. She turned to the chair. Adrian was slumped forward, held up only by the straps. Seren was on her knees behind him. Her bioluminescence faded to a dull, terrifying gray. She was unconscious. "Adrian!" Rhea holstered her gun and sprinted to the chair. She checked his pulse. It was there, but it was erratic. Too fast, then too slow. "Seren!" Rhea shook the alien princess. Seren gasped, her eyes flying open. They were dim, flickering. "Did it work?" The ship stopped. Rhea set her hands shaking as she fumbled for a medstim in her belt. "But he is not waking up." "He is the fuse," Seren whispered, crawling around the chair to grab Adrian's hand. "He absorbed the conflict. He is holding the lock." She placed her hand over Adrian's heart. "He needs power. His biology cannot sustain the link alone." "What do I do?" Rhea asked, jamming the stim into Adrian's neck. "Adrenaline is not going to fix a fried brain." "Not medicine," Seren said, her voice weak. "Life. I need to give him bioluminescence, but I am drained. I need a catalyst." Rhea looked at Adrian's pale face. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had failed, the man who had just saved 2 civilizations. "Take it from me," Rhea said. "I do not have glowing skin, but I am stubborn as hell." Seren looked at her. "It does not work like that. But the emotional resonance. If you hold him, if you anchor him to this world, I can channel the residual energy from the network." Rhea did not hesitate. She knelt on the other side of the chair. She took Adrian's other hand. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. "Come back, you idiot," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "You promised me a date 3 years ago. You are not getting out of it by dying." Seren closed her eyes, and a faint pulse of light traveled from her chest, down her arm, into Adrian. At the same time, Rhea squeezed his hand, pouring every ounce of her will into him. The 3 of them formed a circuit: alien biology, human grit, and the broken man in the middle. Adrian gasped. It was a ragged, ugly sound, like a drowning man breaking the surface. His eyes snapped open. They were not brown anymore. They were not mismatched. They were solid, shifting silver, the color of pure data. He coughed, his body convulsing once before settling. "Ow," Adrian croaked. Rhea let out a sob that was half laugh, pulling back to look at him. "You are alive." "Define alive," Adrian rasped. He looked at his hands. The silver light in his eyes faded back to brown, but deep in the pupils, a faint code still scrolled. "I feel like I just drank a smoothie made of lightning and bureaucratic paperwork." "The fleet?" Seren asked, leaning heavily against the chair. "Is it done?" Adrian closed his eyes for a second. "The negative ceasefire is active. I wrote a new route command. No ship in either fleet can fire its main weapons unless the order is authenticated by a dual-key encryption." "Who holds the keys?" Rhea asked. Adrian opened his eyes. He pointed to Seren. Then he pointed to Rhea. "You do," Adrian said. "And the server is me." Rhea stared at him. "You mean—" "I mean," Adrian said, unbuckling the straps with trembling hands, "that if Stone wants to fire a gun, he has to ask you. If Jatar wants to fire a torpedo, he has to ask Seren. And both of you have to agree. And then I have to allow it." "You made yourself the safety switch for the entire solar system," Seren said, a look of horrified awe on her face. "I made myself the hostage," Adrian corrected. He stood up, his legs wobbling. Rhea and Seren both grabbed him, supporting his weight. "Stone is going to come for you," Rhea said grimly. "He will not let one man hold that kind of power." "Jatar will try to canonize you or dissect you," Seren added. "Let them try," Adrian said. He looked out the window at the drifting ships. For the first time in 100 years, the space between Earth and the Moon was silent. No engines, no weapons charging, just silence. "Right now," Adrian said, looking at the two women holding him up, the soldier and the princess, the past and the future. "I just want to go home." The blast doors finally hissed open. The Marines stormed in, weapons raised. But they stopped. They looked at Admiral Kincaid. They looked at the alien princess. And they looked at the man in the cheap leather jacket standing between them. And slowly, one by one, they lowered their rifles. Because every single one of them had a heads-up display in their helmet. And on every single display, a new status message was flashing in bright, unignorable green letters. Command Authority, Hail Adrian. Status, Do not engage. Primary Directive, Protect the bridge. Adrian smiled weakly. "I think I just got a promotion." He slumped forward, and the world went black. But this time, it was just sleep. The deep, dreamless sleep of a man who had looked into the eye of the storm and made it blink. The medical bay on Zenith Prime smelled of antiseptic and recycled oxygen, a scent that Adrian Hale associated with the worst moments of his life. He sat on the edge of a biobed, swinging his legs like a bored child, while a medical drone hovered around his head, scanning his neural pathways, with a hum that sounded suspiciously like a disapproving sigh. "Your cortisol levels are down by 40%, the drone announced in a synthetic tenor. "However, your caffeine levels are critically low. I recommend a nutrient paste." "I recommend a coffee," Adrian muttered. "Black. The kind that tastes like burnt rubber and regret." "Nutrient paste dispensed." The drone ignored him, sliding a tray of gray sludge onto the bedside table. The door to the private ward hissed open. Admiral Rhea Kincaid walked in. She was not wearing her dress uniform. She was in fatigues, the sleeves rolled up, revealing a bandage on her forearm, where a piece of shrapnel from the blast door had grazed her. She looked exhausted, but the frantic terror of the interface lab was gone, replaced by a weary, guarded resolve. "You look terrible," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I feel like I have been used as a wireless router for the entire solar system," Adrian replied, poking the gray sludge with a spoon. "Which, technically, I have. How are things out there?" "Quiet," Rhea said. "Terrifyingly quiet. The fleets are holding position. No one can fire. My navigation officers are reporting that their targeting computers simply refuse to lock onto anything without a dual authorization code." "And Stone," Rhea's expression darkened. "He arrived at the station an hour ago. He is in the Grand Hall with Commander Jatar. They are discussing the terms of your custody." "Custody," Adrian repeated the word, tasting bitter. "Not freedom. Custody." "Stone is spinning this." Rhea walked over, pulling a chair close to the bed. She lowered her voice. "He is claiming that the ceasefire is a trick, that you have been compromised by Aurelian tech and are holding the Alliance fleet hostage. He wants to invoke the Treason Act, Adrian. He wants to take you back to Earth, to the Black Sites." "And Jatar." "He thinks you are a religious artifact," a new voice chimed in. Seren Kaith stepped out of the adjoining bathroom, drying her face with a towel. Her bioluminescence was dim, a soft, pale blue that suggested fatigue, but her amber eyes were sharp. She wore a simple gray station jumpsuit, having discarded her royal armor. It made her look smaller, more human. "My father's general believes you are the living covenant," Seren said, tossing the towel onto a chair. "He wants to bring you to the Aurelian homeworld. He says you will be treated like a god." "I have read about your gods," Adrian said dryly. "Do they not usually get sacrificed at the end of the harvest festival?" Metaphorically, Seren shrugged. Usually. Great options, Adrian rubbed his temples. Black site vivisection or ritual sacrifice. I should have just stayed on the dating app. There was a girl from the Mars colony who just wanted to talk about hydroponics. Rhea reached out, covering Adrian's hand with hers. Her skin was rough, warm, and familiar. I will not let Stone take you, Adrian. I still command the loyalty of the Iron Will. If we have to, we fight our way out. And where? Adrian looked at her, then at Seren. The moment I leave the station, the ceasefire breaks. If I get too far from the fleets, the signal degrades. The lock lifts, and then they start shooting again. He stood up, pushing the nutrient paste away. The movement made him dizzy, but he forced himself to steady his breathing. The data in his head was a constant background noise, a low hum of engine diagnostics, life support rhythms, and encrypted comms chatter. He was not just a man anymore. He was a walking antenna. I am not running, Adrian said. 3 years ago, I ran. I took the fall for New Terra because I thought it would save my family. I thought if I disappeared, the system would correct itself. He looked at his reflection in the darkened window. But the system does not correct itself. It just gets more efficient at grinding people down. What are you going to do? Seren asked, stepping closer. Adrian turned to them. His eyes flashed with that strange digital silver for a fraction of a second. Stone wants a meeting. Let us give him a meeting. But I am not going there as a prisoner. I am going there as the landlord. The Grand Hall of Zenith Prime was designed to intimidate. It was a vast circular chamber with a floor made of transparent aluminum, allowing the delegates to look down at the Earth, rotating majestically below. It was meant to remind them of the fragility of their world. Instead, it usually just gave everyone vertigo. Director Calder Stone sat at the head of the obsidian table. In the flesh, he was even more imposing than his hologram. He was a large man built like a fortress with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they had never blinked in 50 years. He wore a tailored suit that cost more than Adrian's lifetime earnings. Opposite him sat Commander Jatar. The Aurelian giant was unarmored, wearing ceremonial robes of flowing silk that shifted color with his mood. Currently, they are a deep, aggressive crimson. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. When the doors opened, Stone did not look up from his datapad. You are late, Admiral, and I see you have brought the subject without restraints. That is a violation of protocol. Rhea walked in first, her head high. The subject is a free citizen of the Alliance Director, unless you have a warrant signed by a civilian judge. I do not need a judge, Stone said, finally looking up. His gaze slid past Rhea to Adrian. I have the Emergency Powers Act. In times of crisis, the Director of Security is the law. Adrian walked into the room, flanked by Seren. He felt small in the presence of these titans of war and politics. He was wearing a borrowed flight suit that was a size too big, and his hair was a mess. But he walked to the end of the table and pulled out a chair. You are sitting in the mediator's chair, Stone said coldly. Well, I am the one stopping you from nuking each other, Adrian said, sitting down. So I figure I got the job by default. Jatar let out a low, rumbling growl. Insolence. You speak to the High Commander of the Third Fleet. You are a vessel human, a holy container. You should be silent until spoken to. I am not a container, Adrian said, looking the giant in the eye. And if you call me a vessel one more time, I am going to override your ship's environmental controls and set the humidity to 0. I hear Aurelian skin cracks when it gets dry. Jatar's robes flared purple with shock. He opened his mouth to roar, but Seren slammed her hand on the table. Sit down, Jatar, she commanded. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the harmonic resonance of royal authority. He is the bridge. If he speaks, you listen. Stone leaned back, studying Adrian, with the look of a man examining a bug under a microscope. Let us dispense with the theatrics. Mr. Hale, you have illegally accessed military networks. You have seized control of Alliance property. You are currently holding 2 fleets hostage. Surrender your neural codes to me, and I will guarantee you a comfortable cell. Refuse, and I will have you declared an enemy combatant. I will strip your citizenship. I will freeze your family's assets. I will make you a ghost. You already made me a ghost, Adrian said quietly. 3 years ago. Remember, New Terra Stone said dismissively. A tragedy, but necessary. We learned valuable lessons about shield harmonics from that failure. Failure, Adrian repeated. That is what you called it in the report. A system failure caused by negligent coding. My coding. It was your shift, Stone said. It was your responsibility. Adrian closed his eyes. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind. The connection was effortless now. He was not hacking, he was simply remembering. AegisNet was part of him. He navigated its architecture, sliding past the firewalls and the encryption keys that Stone thought were impenetrable. He went deep, past the tactical logs, past the personnel files, down to the black box archives. I have been looking at the logs, Director, Adrian said, opening his eyes. Since I woke up, I wanted to know how I missed it, how a raider fleet got past a detection grid I spent 2 years optimizing. You were young, Stone said, checking his watch. Inexperienced. No, Adrian stood up. I was locked out. The holographic display in the center of the table flickered. It changed from a map of the solar system to a scrolling wall of text and audio waveforms. What is this? Stone demanded, standing up. Turn that off. I cannot, Adrian lied. My hands are not on the keyboard. The audio began to play. It was scratchy, distorted by 3 years of digital decay, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Stone. Initiate Protocol 7. Lower the shield frequency in Sector 4 of New Terra. Allow the Raider scouting party to breach. A second voice, an aide replied. Director, that sector is civilian. The casualties will be unacceptable. Stone's voice returned cold and flat. The Senate is voting on the defense budget next week. They need to be reminded why they need us. They need to see blood. Let the Raiders in. Blame the new kid on the night shift. Hale. He is expendable. The silence in the Grand Hall was absolute. Even Jatar looked stunned, his robes turning a confused gray. Rhea was staring at Stone, her face pale. She had known Stone was ruthless. She had known he was ambitious. But she had believed in her heart that he was doing it for Earth. You let them in, Rhea whispered. 3,000 people died. Families, children. You let them in for a budget increase. Stone's face was a mask of fury. This is faked. A deep fake simulation generated by the alien AI. He is trying to divide us. It is time-stamped, Adrian said, pointing at the hologram. Encrypted with your biometric key. And it is not just New Terra, Director. I found the logs for the Viridian incident, the Luna Dock sabotage. You have been orchestrating this war for 10 years. Every time peace talks get close, something blows up. Every time the Aurelians offer a treaty, a colony gets raided. Adrian looked at Jatar. And you. Check your own logs, Commander. Stone has been feeding intelligence to your extremist factions. He needed an enemy. And you needed a war to keep your warrior caste in power. Jatar looked at his datapad, which was syncing with the data Adrian was broadcasting. The giant alien sank back into his chair. By the tides, he rumbled. The coordinates for the ambush at the nebula came from an Earth transmission. He played us, Adrian said. Both of us. He turned a diplomatic dispute into a meat grinder because peace is bad for business. Stone pulled a sidearm from his jacket. It was a sleek, silver officer's pistol. He aimed it directly at Adrian's chest. Enough, Stone snarled. I built this alliance. I did what had to be done to ensure humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy. You think you can judge me? You are nothing but a glitch. "Director, put the weapon down," Rhea shouted, drawing her own gun. The Marines guarding the door raised their rifles, unsure of where to aim. "I am the law," Stone shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. "And I am canceling the broadcast." "You are not canceling anything," Adrian said calmly. He did not flinch. He did not raise his hands. "Because we are not just in this room, Director. We are alive." The Stone froze. "What?" "I bridged the feed," Adrian said. "To every screen on the station. To every ship in the fleet. To the news networks in Neo-Seattle. To the Aurelian diplomatic channel." He gestured to the transparent floor. "Look down." Stone looked. Below them, on the night side of Earth, the lights of the cities were blinking. Messages were scrolling across the orbital billboards. The audio he had just played was echoing in the living rooms of 3 billion people. "They all heard you," Adrian said. "They know." Stone's hand began to shake. He looked at the gun, then at Adrian, then at Rhea. He realized with a dawning horror that shooting Adrian would not silence the truth. It would only confirm it. "It was for Earth," Stone whispered, his voice cracking. "They would have overrun us." "No," Rhea said, stepping forward. She did not shoot him. She simply reached out and took the gun from his trembling hand. "They would have talked to us. You were just too afraid to listen." She turned to the Marines. "Sergeant, arrest Director Stone. Charges high treason, conspiracy to commit mass murder, and crimes against sentience." The sergeant did not hesitate. "Yes, Admiral." As they dragged Stone away, he did not scream. He just stared at Adrian with hollow, dead eyes. "You broke the system, Hale. Do you think you can build a better one? Chaos is coming, and it will be your fault." "I will take my chances with chaos," Adrian said as the doors closed. The room felt suddenly empty. The tension of the standoff had broken, replaced by the heavy, confusing reality of the aftermath. Jatar stood up. He looked at Adrian, then at Seren. He bowed his head slightly, not a bow of submission, but of acknowledgement. "The Empire has been deceived," Jatar said. "I must return to the High Council. There will be purges. Those who conspired with the human stone will face the tide's judgment." He looked at Seren. "Princess, you are expected to return with us. You have found the key bond. Your mission is complete." Seren stood next to Adrian. She looked at the giant commander, her chin high. "My mission was to save my people, Jatar, not to enslave a savior. Adrian is not coming with us. He is the bridge," Jatar insisted. "He belongs to the history of Aurelia." "He belongs to himself," Seren said firmly. "And I am staying. Someone has to ensure that the next director of security does not try to finish what Stone started. I am appointing myself the permanent ambassador to the Alliance." Jatar stared at her for a long moment. Then a rumble that might have been a chuckle escaped his chest. "You have your father's stubbornness. Very well. But be warned, child. Humans are treacherous, even the ones who glow." With a sweep of his crimson robes, Jatar left. Adrian exhaled, collapsing back into his chair. "Is it over? Can I go home now?" Rhea holstered her weapon. She looked at Adrian, then at Seren. There was sadness in her eyes, but also relief. "Not yet, Adrian. You just toppled the government. You are going to have to fill out a lot of paperwork." Later that night, they found a quiet spot on the observation deck. It was a small blister of glass protruding from the side of the station, away from the busy docks and the noisy command centers. The stars were bright and unblinking. The two fleets were still there, but they had drifted apart. Their formation lights turned to green, the universal color of non-aggression. Adrian sat on the floor, his back against the bulkhead, holding a bottle of synthetic beer that Rhea had smuggled out of the officer's mess. Seren sat to his left, her legs crossed, meditating. Rhea stood by the window looking out at the iron wheel. "So," Adrian said, taking a sip, "I am technically unemployed again, since my job was fixing vents for a government that I just helped arrest." I think we can find you a position, Rhea said without turning around. Consultant, liaison, the guy who stops the missiles. I like the guy who stops the missiles, Seren opened one eye. It has a nice ring to it. Better than the Living Covenant. That sounds like a dusty book. I just want my apartment back, Adrian said. And my deposit. Silence stretched between them. It was the kind of silence that comes after the adrenaline fades, when the questions you have been avoiding start to knock on the door. Adrian, Rhea, turned around. She slid down the wall to sit opposite him. What happens now? With us? With everything? She gestured between the three of them. Adrian looked at Rhea. He saw the history there. The nights studying for exams. The first time they kissed under the lunar biodome. The pain in her eyes when he was discharged. She was his anchor to who he used to be. She was the conscience that had kept him from becoming bitter. Then he looked at Seren. He saw the light, the possibility. The way she had looked at him in the bar and seen a mystery instead of a failure. She was the reason he had stepped out of the shadows. She was the future he hadn't known he wanted. I do not know, Adrian admitted. Stone was right about one thing. I broke the system. The old rules do not apply anymore. Human, alien, enemy, ally. It is all mixed up. I cannot go back to being just a soldier, Rhea admitted softly. Not after seeing what I saw on the network. I felt them, Adrian. The Aurelians. Their fear. It felt exactly like ours. And I cannot go back to being a princess in a high tower, Seren said. I saw the humans. Your stubbornness. Your capacity for hope even when you are drowning. It is intoxicating. Adrian put the bottle down. I love you, Rhea, he said. It was the first time he had said it in 3 years. I love the world we tried to build. I love that you fought for it even when I gave up. Rhea's eyes glistened. She reached out and squeezed his hand. And I think, Adrian turned to Seren. I think I am falling for you, Seren. For the way you see the universe. For the fact that you swiped right on a guy who listed existential dread as a hobby. Seren smiled, her skin glowing a soft, warm pink. She took his other hand. So, Adrian said, looking between them, I am not choosing. I am not choosing between Earth and Aurelia. And I am not choosing between the past and the future. We need both. If we are going to keep this peace, if we are going to keep the fleets from firing, we have to do it together. A triumvirate, Rhea raised an eyebrow. That is politically complicated. A family, Seren corrected. A messy, complicated interspecies family. We protect the bridge. We protect the truth. And we raise the kids, Adrian added. Kids, Rhea and Seren asked in unison. The orphans, Adrian said. Stone's war left thousands of them, on both sides. Mixed kids. Kids who do not belong anywhere, like me. We build a place for them. A place where they do not have to choose sides. Rhea looked at him. Really looked at him and saw the strategist she had admired finally finding a war worth fighting. Habitat Aria, she whispered. The old derelict station in Sector 7. We could retrofit it. Make it neutral ground. A sanctuary, Seren nodded. I can secure funding from the progressive factions in the Empire. And I can fix the ventilation, Adrian grinned. Rhea laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. You and your vents. They sat there for a long time, hands linked, watching the earth rotate below them. The love triangle hadn't snapped. It had expanded. It had turned into a foundation. They weren't two women fighting for a man. They were three people fighting for a new definition of home. 2 days later, the transition of power was official. An interim council was formed on Earth, composed of leaders who had not been implicated in Stone's data dump. A similar council was forming on the Aurelian homeworld. The ceasefire held. Adrian stood at the airlock of the shuttle that would take them to Sector 7. He wore a new jacket, real leather this time, a gift from Seren. Rhea was checking the flight manifest. Seren was arguing with a loading drone about the proper handling of her bioluminescent plants. "Ready?" Rhea asked, looking up. "Ready," Adrian said. But before he stepped onto the shuttle, he felt a prickle at the base of his neck. It wasn't the fleets. The fleets were quiet. It was something else. A signal. Faint, old, and deep. He paused, looking back at the stars. "Adrian." Seren touched his arm. "What is it?" "I don't know." Adrian frowned. "I thought I heard a voice. Not AegisNet. Not the flow." He focused. The signal was gone. But the feeling remained. A sense of familiarity. A resonance that felt like family. "It is probably just an echo," Adrian said, shaking it off. "My brain is still rebooting." "Come on," Rhea called from the cockpit. "We have a world to build." Adrian stepped into the shuttle. As the airlock cycled shut, he didn't see the single encrypted packet of data that pulsed from a deep space buoy near the edge of the solar system. It was a simple message directed at the specific genetic markers of the bridge heart. Subject: Project Genesis. Status active. Location unknown. Message: The child has awakened. Initiate Phase 2. The shuttle blasted off, streaking towards the future, leaving the ghosts of the past behind. But the past, as Adrian was about to learn, was not done with him yet. The war was over. But the mystery of who Adrian Hale really was, that had only just begun. The construction of Habitat Aria was not silent. It was a symphony of sparks grinding metal, and the shouts of workers from 2 different star systems, trying to figure out whose metric system to use. The station, formerly a derelict husks in Sector 7, was being reborn. It was no longer a military outpost. It was a patchwork quilt of human steel and Aurelian bioresin, a physical manifestation of the truce Adrian Hale had forced upon the galaxy. Deep within the station's core, however, there was silence. Adrian stood in the center of a spherical chamber that Seren had called the Sanctum. The walls were lined not with computer servers, but with crystalline structures that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. It was the Lumen Archive, an ancient Aurelian database that Jatar had reluctantly unlocked before his departure. "Are you sure about this?" Rhea Kincaid asked. She stood by the door, her arms crossed. She was out of uniform, wearing a loose tunic and trousers that looked suspiciously like something Seren had picked out for her. "We have already toppled the government, Adrian. Do we really need to dig up more ghosts?" "It is not just ghosts," Seren said, walking her fingers over a console of floating light. "The archive claims to have the origin file for the bridge heart. If we are going to understand what Adrian is, we need to see this." Adrian stared at the central crystal. He felt that familiar pull, the resonance that had started the moment he swiped right on his datapad. But this time, it wasn't the aggressive, jagged demand of a warship. It was soft. It felt like a memory he hadn't lived. "Play it," Adrian said. Seren tapped a sequence into the light. The room darkened. The central crystal flared, projecting a 3-dimensional image into the air. It was grainy, distorted by 25 years of data decay, but the figures were recognizable. One was a tall Aurelian male, wearing robes of deep indigo, the color of the diplomat caste. He had the same high cheekbones as Seren, the same amber eyes. The other figure was a human woman. She had messy dark hair, a lab coat stained with coffee, and a smile that made Adrian's breath hitch in his throat. "Mom," Adrian whispered. He had not seen her face since he was 5 years old. The official report said she had died in a shuttle accident on the way to a conference. In the hologram, his mother Elena Hale was laughing. She was holding a bundle in her arms, a baby. "Recorded cycle 409, the Aurelian man spoke. His voice was deep, gentle. "Project Genesis is successful. The child is stable. His neural pathways are accepting the dual imprint." "Stop calling it a Project Valen," Elena chided him, rocking the baby. "His name is Adrian, and he is not an experiment. He is our son." "He is both, Elena," Valen said, touching the baby's forehead with a glowing finger. The High Council believes we are creating a weapon. Director Stone believes we are creating a spy. But they are wrong. We are creating a treaty. A living treaty. Adrian watched, frozen. He felt Rhea's hand on his shoulder gripping tight. Stone knew, Adrian said, his voice trembling. He knew my mother. He knew who I was. The hologram shifted. The scene changed to a frantic, chaotic recording. Alarms were blaring. Elena was running down a corridor clutching the toddler Adrian. "They are here!" Elena shouted into the recorder. "Stone's men!" They found out about the resonance potential. Valen is holding them off at the airlock. I am going to hide the boy. I have suppressed his Aurelian markers. He will look human. He will be human. Until the day he is ready. There was a sound of an explosion. The camera shook. "If anyone finds this," Elena whispered, staring directly into the lens, tears streaming down her face. "Please, tell him he was not made for war. He was made because two people from different stars fell in love. He is the bridge, not between fleets, but between hearts." The recording was cut to static. The lights in the sanctum slowly came back up. Adrian stood in the silence, tears running freely down his face. For his entire life he had felt like a mistake, a glitch in the system. He had always wondered why he could see patterns others missed, why the binary logic of computers felt like a second language, why he felt a phantom limb where a connection should be. He wasn't a glitch. He was the designer. "My mother didn't die in an accident," Adrian said, his voice gaining strength. "Stone killed her. He killed Valen. He wiped out the project because a living treaty is bad for the war economy. If people knew that a human and an Aurelian could have a child and could love each other, his whole narrative of us versus them would collapse." Seren walked over to him. She looked at him with a new kind of reverence, but it was mixed with a profound sadness. "Valen was my uncle," Seren said softly. "The archives say he disappeared during a diplomatic mission. I never knew." She took Adrian's hand. "According to the old laws of the Aurelian Empire, you are not just a citizen, Adrian. You are of the blood. You carry the genetic markers of a high house." "What does that mean?" Rhea asked, stepping closer to protect him even from the truth. "It means," Seren said, looking Adrian in the eye, "that you have a claim. Not just to the bridge but to a seat on the council. Perhaps even the throne if the lineage is verified. You could rule Adrian. You could command the obedience of the fleets by right of blood, not just by neural force." Adrian looked at his hands. He looked at the faint, silver code that still danced in his peripheral vision. He thought about the power he had held in the interface lab, the ability to silence 2,000 ships with a thought. He thought about the throne. He thought about the crown. Then he thought about the noodle bar in Neo Seattle. He thought about the way the rain smelled on the pavement. He thought about the meme he had sent Seren. "No," Adrian said. "No," Seren blinked. "Adrian, with that authority you could force peace. You could ensure no one ever questions you." "I do not want to be a king," Adrian said. "And I definitely do not want to be a god. My mother hid me to save me from being a tool. If I take the throne, I just become a different kind of tool. A shiny one maybe, but still a tool." He looked at the fading image of his parents. "If I am anything," Adrian said, his voice echoing in the crystalline chamber, "I am proof that we can be more than the war that made us. I am not a ruler. I am just the evidence." Rhea let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. She walked around to face him, placing her hands on his cheeks, wiping away the tears. "I am sorry," Rhea whispered. "I worked for the man who did this to you. I wore his uniform. I enforced his laws." "You didn't know," Adrian said, covering her hands with his. "I should have looked closer," Rhea insisted. "I let the system grind you down, Adrian. I let it crush your family. I cannot undo that. But I can spend the rest of my life making sure it never happens to another kid. She stepped back, her eyes lighting up with the same tactical brilliance that had made her an admiral, but this time the target was compassion. Habitat area, Rhea said firmly. We do not just make it a neutral zone. We make it a home. There are thousands of war orphans, Adrian. Mixed kids. Kids with gene mods that the purists hate. Kids who have nowhere to go because they are living proof of the enemy. We take them in, Seren added, catching the vision. We use the archive. We teach them their history. Both histories. We create a culture here that is not Earth, and not Aurelia. Something new. And the fleets, Adrian asked. We repaint them. Rhea smiled a dangerous, rebellious smile. The Iron Will has the strongest tractor beams in the sector. It is not a battleship anymore. It is a tugboat. We use it to haul raw materials for habitat. We take the railguns off the destroyers and replace them with agricultural dispensers. We turn the swords into plowshares, literally. Adrian looked between them, the warrior who wanted to build and the princess who wanted to teach. And me, Adrian asked. What do I do if I am not the king and I am not the weapon? You are the dad, Seren smiled, squeezing his hand. And the fuse. You keep the bridge open. You make sure that if Stone's successors or Jatar's fanatics ever try to start the fire again, the water is there to put it out. Adrian took a deep breath. For the first time in his life, the noise in his head, the constant hum of anxiety, of data, of loneliness, quieted down. Okay, Adrian said. I can do that. But I am going to need a lot of coffee. And maybe a bigger apartment. 6 months later, the transformation of Sector 7 was a miracle of engineering and stubbornness. Habitat Aria rotated slowly against the backdrop of the nebula, a gleaming jewel of glass steel and bioluminescent coral. It did not look like a fortress. It looked like a garden growing in the void. The docks were busy, but not with troop transports. Massive ships painted in bright, chaotic colors. Pinks, greens, silvers were unloading supplies. The Iron Will was there, stripped of its gray armor, its hull now adorned with a massive mural of a dove and a sea serpent entwined, painted by the children of the station. It was hauling a massive asteroid of ice to replenish the station's water reserves. In the central plaza of the habitat, the air smelled of roasting peanuts and ozone flowers. The gravity was set to a comfortable standard that accommodated both heavy worlders and low-G spacers. Adrian sat on a bench, watching the chaos. He wore a simple civilian jacket, though the fabric was a high-grade weave that Seren had insisted on. On his wrist, he wore a bracelet that matched Seren's, a small, pulsing link that kept him connected to the station's core and to the fleet's safety protocols. He was tired. Raising a civilization was exhausting work, but it was tiring. Packet for the administrator. A drone hovered in front of him, dropping a physical data pad into his lap. I told you not to call me administrator, Adrian sighed, picking it up. Call me the janitor, or just Adrian. Processing request, the drone beeped. Request denied. Administrator sounds more authoritative. Adrian rolled his eyes. He glanced at the pad. It was a logistics report from Rhea. The hydroponic farms on Deck 12 were producing their first crop of tomatoes. Actual, real tomatoes, not nutrient paste. He looked up as a shadow fell over him. Seren stood there. She was wearing a tunic covered in paint stains. Her silver hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked less like a princess and more like an art teacher, which essentially she was. You are hiding, Seren accused him, sitting down next to him. I am supervising, Adrian corrected. I am engaging in high-level observation of the social dynamics. You are avoiding the budget meeting, Seren laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Her skin was warm, glowing a contented peach color. Rhea yells when we talk about the budget, Adrian shuddered. She tries to court-martial the spreadsheet. Speaking of Rhea, Seren pointed. Rhea was walking across the plaza. She was surrounded by a gaggle of children. Some were human, Some were Aurelian, and some were like Adrian. Beautiful, confusing mixes with glowing freckles or silver eyes. They were hanging off her arms asking a million questions. Rhea, the woman who had once commanded the deadliest fleet in the system, looked harried. She was trying to wipe ice cream off the face of a small Aurelian girl, while simultaneously answering a question about propulsion physics from a human boy. She looked up, saw Adrian and Seren, and marched over, dragging the children with her. "You two are useless," Rhea declared, though her eyes were bright with laughter. "I am over here trying to explain why we cannot vent the playground into space, just to see what happens to a soccer ball, and you are sitting on a bench." "We are providing moral support," Adrian said, making room for her. Rhea sat down on his other side, letting out a groan of relief. The children immediately swarmed the bench, climbing over them. "So," Rhea said, stealing the datapad from Adrian's hands, "tomatoes are ready. We are having a salad tonight. A real salad. If you complain about the texture, I will shoot you." "I would never," Adrian promised. He looked at them. To his left, the alien princess, who had taught him that he was special. To his right, the human soldier who had fought to keep him safe. They weren't a triangle anymore. A triangle had sharp points. It had angles that didn't meet. They were a circle, a circuit. They didn't have a conventional label for what they were. They shared a living space in the commander's spire. They shared meals. They shared the crushing weight of leadership and the quiet moments of exhaustion. Sometimes Adrian would wake up from a nightmare about the war, and he would find Seren's light soothing him, or Rhea's hand holding his. It was messy. It was complicated. It confused the hell out of the tabloids back on Earth. But it worked. "Hey, Mr. Adrian!" A small voice tugged at his sleeve. Adrian looked down. It was a boy, maybe 7 years old. He had human ears, but his skin had the faint blue shimmer of the Aurelian deep ocean cast. "Yes, Leo," Adrian asked. "Is it true?" the boy asked, his eyes wide. "Is that true?" "Jimmy said you started the whole station with a phone," Leo said, holding up a toy spaceship. "He said you fought the bad guys with a dating app. Is that true? Did you really start all this with a dating app?" Adrian blinked. He looked at Seren. She covered her mouth to hide a giggle, her skin flushing pink. He looked at Rhea. She snorted, shaking her head, but she was smiling. "Well," Adrian said, leaning down to look the boy in the eye, "it is a little more complicated than that, Leo. But yes, technically." "Who did you date?" Leo asked. "Was it a monster?" "Hey," Seren poked Adrian in the ribs. "No," Adrian laughed, catching Seren's hand and kissing the knuckles. "It wasn't a monster. It was a very shiny lady who liked bad jokes." "And a very scary lady with a big gun," Seren added, nodding at Rhea. "I still have the gun," Rhea reminded them. "Did you win?" Leo asked. In the story, Adrian looked around the plaza. He saw the flags of Earth and the banners of Aurelia flying side by side on the flagpoles, fluttering in the artificial breeze. He saw the Iron Will unloading food instead of missiles. He saw a group of teenagers, mixed species, sitting in a circle playing music. He felt the hum of the station, the heartbeat of 1,000 people who were learning to live without fear. He looked at the datapad in Rhea's hand, reporting the first harvest of tomatoes. "Yeah," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, Leo. I think we won." The boy cheered and ran off to tell his friends that the story was true. "You realize," Rhea said, leaning back against the bench, "that is going to be in the history books now. The great peace founded on a swipe right." "It is a good lesson," Seren said, resting her head on Adrian's shoulder again. "It teaches the next generation that sometimes the most important thing you can do is take a chance on someone you do not know." "And check their bio for red flags," Adrian added, "like orbiting warships." "Shut up and kiss us," Rhea said, closing her eyes. And he did. First Rhea, tasting of coffee and resilience, then Seren, tasting of ozone and starlight. as the artificial sun began to set over Habitat Aria, casting long, golden shadows across the plaza. Adrian Hale looked through the observation port one last time. Far out in the distance, he could see the shipping lanes. They were full of light. Not the jagged fire of engines burning for combat, but the steady, weaving glow of commerce and travel. The web of the solar system was being rewoven, strand by strand. Stone was in a cell awaiting trial. Jatar was retired, writing memoirs that no one would read. The AegisNet was now a weather control system, using its massive processing power to predict rain for farmers instead of artillery strikes. Adrian touched the bracelet on his wrist. The connection to the bridge was still there, a quiet hum in the back of his mind. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was a promise. The best revenge against a system that wanted to turn you into a weapon, he realized, wasn't to destroy it. It was to use its own power to heal the wounds it had made. He wasn't a glitch. He wasn't a mistake. He was Adrian Hale, systems engineer, father, partner. And he was definitely, absolutely, finally home. "Come on," Adrian said, standing up and pulling his family with him. "I think the tomatoes are waiting." They walked together toward the residential spire, three silhouettes against the light of a new dawn, leaving the war behind them, one step at a time.